Winter Sketches 3. What's your favorite color? My friend asks, like we're kids, separating sheaves of construction paper. Blood color, I say, then to clarify, not the color in the body, the color out. Streets are deserted, except for the usual bums. Guitar man, always walking lady who simply wears another coat. I, too, put on an extra layer and help friends stock shelves at my local co-op. Chocolate from Seattle, coffee from Ecuador, rabbits under plastic who retained their bodily forms. Because Simone Weil believed love is not consolation, it is light, she expected to receive revelations and loneliness from others. Across the river, a dark structure above cracked cement, a sign that says woodworking. My dad explained we shipped logs to Asia and they shipped boards back to us. I thought this transaction would make sense when I grew up. A friend died last year after writing a book about lighthouses. Pictures of shipwrecks cover his living room walls. As a child, I lay in bed and listened to the highway, pretending the swish of passing cars was the sea. Railing. I got a job at Louisville Sausage the fall after I'd been let go from my position as a railway engineer. They'd fired me in May, and I'd spent the summer trying to find a new engineer position in the mornings, drinking at Hank's in the afternoons, and at night watching the presidential primaries and calculating how long it would take for my savings to sift through my fingers. I had child support payments on top of my own expenses, and I liked to treat my favorite bartender, Cynthia, to dinner now and then. Carlos, a regular at Hank's, introduced me to Luke, the owner at Louisville Sausage, and since the shop was constantly understaffed, Luke hired me on the spot. I earned less than half of what I had as an engineer, but it was still a couple dollars over minimum wage. I didn't mind the pay cut because it was temporary. My license wouldn't expire for another 3 years, and when we elected a president who would push for more gas and oil extraction, railway jobs would once again start to flow. I liked the physical work at Louisville. Early mornings we cut bones out of slabs of meat. Mid to late mornings we poured 50-pound tubs of meat and spices into a grinder, put the mix through a sealer, and packaged the links. Early afternoons we packed 20-pound boxes of links into the vans, and 2 guys left for deliveries while the rest of us mixed spices for the next day and cleaned the machinery, tubs, tables, and floors. For the sake of the meat, our workroom was cold, and I learned to wear long johns, gloves, and a beanie, and was still half frozen at the end of the workday. But the temperature kept me alert, and the hard work sometimes distracted me from thinking about the man I'd killed. After the investigation was completed, I didn't discuss it with anybody. I'd been officially acquitted, but I kept feeling like there was something I could have done. My train was heading east toward Kansas City. The fog was low and dense. Around 4:30 a.m., I saw something curled up on the rails about 300 feet away. I put on the emergency brake, but knew it was too late. No, I thought, no. Right before that guy's head rose, I can't remember if I saw his eyes. I later learned he was 20 and most likely drunk or on something, not that that changed anything. The bang sounded like we'd hit the side of a house. I told the dispatcher to send emergency responders and then got out and ran back to see if I could help a crushed body, because that's what I needed to do. All 10 employees at Louisville Sausage were supposed to do everything, which worked as well as you might expect, especially with Luke always in the office doing paperwork and no manager on the floor. This old guy, Joey, had worked there almost 40 years and seemed the most likely person to manage the rest of us, but he usually kept his head down, only speaking to tell a story about old school Louisville, or to tell Luke off. Joey had no teeth and flabby white arms and took a smoke break every 30 minutes. Because Luke's father had promised him a salary comparable to what unionized factory workers earned back in the day, he was making 15 or 20 more per hour than the next highest paid employee. If Luke threatened to lower his pay because of his smoke breaks, Joey would threaten to rat on Luke for his violations. He didn't pay us overtime. He only gave us one 20-minute break and an 8 or 9 hour day, and he dealt with some of his clients under the table. Luke probably figured the more Joey smoked, the sooner he'd die. Rumor was he had cancer. I was glad Aaron from Appalachia sometimes told us what to do. If we were milling around, he'd say, "Let's move on to the grinder," or "Who wants to help me wash tubs?" If Carlos or my high school classmate Matt were running their mouths instead of cutting, Aaron would glare. Sometimes they'd glare back, but I think we were all grateful some of us kept on task so we could eventually get out of there. There was one woman, a couple other Hispanics, an Italian, and another white or two depending on the week. Enrique, a Mayan Mexican, was the second hardest worker on the crew. He moved quickly and precisely, listening without comment while we joked and complained, probably because he didn't understand much of what we said. Luke could appear at any time, so we saved most of our bitching about him for the bar. Sometimes we worked without speaking at all, the scrape of our knives or the churn of the machinery the only noise. After I'd been on the job 3 months, Luke started sending me on deliveries. Thursdays, Joey and I delivered to towns north until Fort Collins. Fridays, Carlos and I took the route south toward Denver. It was winter by then, and the delivery van had a bad heater, but I liked to be on the road, the land nothing but flat to the northeast and south, and to the west until it met the foothills of the Rockies. Trump had won the primaries, and I was sure he'd win the election. In a year or so, I'd be gone, and until then, I'd enjoy the drive. On the last Thursday in March, the delivery van kept sliding on 287 between Loveland and Fort Collins. A foot of snow had fallen the night before. I'd had trouble slogging through it to work and had arrived right before Luke let us in at 5:40. If you were late more than once, he'd fire you, and I planned to use my free pass for something better than weather. I'd had to dig us out of a drift behind a pizza place in Berthold, but now we only had 3 more stops. And I had something to look forward to. Thursday was my weekday evenings with my daughter Laura. We'd meet at Hank's after school, then we'd walk over to my apartment and make dinner together and hang out till her mother picked her up. Laura and I had a deal. I'd give her hot cocoa with her dinner as long as she didn't tell her mom she'd been at Hank's. We stopped at Larry's, a rundown truck stop, to drop off what we called Rojo, our grossest product made from joints, veins, and fat. The dolly wouldn't roll through the snow, so we had to carry in all 20-pound boxes. After we stacked them in the deep freeze, Joey looked at the wares while I took a leak. When I came out, I saw him admiring a long-sleeve gray t-shirt with a wolf on it. This is sharp, he told me, and bought it and put it on over his long johns, leaving his coat unzipped to display it. Traffic was sparse in Fort Collins, no one outside the brick storefronts. Students hurried across the university's snow-covered lawn. We usually unloaded for Oliverios in an alley between 2 buildings, but I didn't want to risk getting stuck again, so we pulled up out front. We wheeled the boxes through the main eating area where a manager was doing paperwork at one of the tables. He nodded to us. After 5 loads, we were done. I rested in the van while Joey dropped off the invoice and picked up the payment. I was supposed to be shadowing from him for that part too, but maneuvering through deep snow had worn me out. The manager came outside waving his arms. I followed him back in. Joey lay on the floor, yellow and white foamy vomit splattered next to him across the red carpet. Seconds after I made sure he was breathing, he sat up, wiped his arms across the vomit on his mustache, and collapsed again. The manager asked if he should call someone, and I told him I'd deal with it. I picked Joey up and carried him to the van. His height made him awkward to carry and heavy despite his thinness. The vomit ran from his wolf shirt onto his jeans. His head was slumped over one shoulder. I remember the last time I'd thrown up, right after I saw the boy I'd run over. I shined my flashlight along the rails as I ran back. I stopped at what was left of him. Most of his body had been flattened. I turned away toward the low black fields. Then I doubled over and heaved 3 times. We passed a hospital on our way in. I'm taking you to the ER, I told Joey. I didn't know if he could hear me or not. As I shifted into gear, the manager ran out again. He had a check in one hand. I rolled in the window and took it. Gracias, I said. At a stoplight, I opened my water bottle and tossed some water onto Joey's face. He blinked and I let out my breath. We're going to the hospital, I said. He touched the wetness on his face. He looked at his soiled wolf shirt and shook his head. He raised his arms to take it off, but then gave up. I pulled into the emergency turnaround and idled. Can you walk? I asked. I'm not going in there, he said. He leaned forward and peeped on the floor. Something's wrong with you. I know that. He lifted his arms again and this time managed to wrangle off the shirt. It was inside out now and the vomit showed through. He laid the shirt across his lap. I hope that cleans up. So if it was cancer and he didn't want to talk about it, that was his business. But he needed help. You should go in. Don't have health insurance, he said. He rubbed his hands on his jeans and looked out the windshield. The inside of the car stank. I rolled the windows down a couple inches. I'll take you home, I said. We'll finish deliveries, he said. An ambulance pulled up behind me, its light flashing. I pulled away and back onto the highway. Joey closed his eyes. By the time I'd finished the Gilda delivery, he was sitting up and smoking with his windows open. Snowflakes blew into the cab. I booked it down I-25 and dropped him off at his ranch house in Lafayette. He stepped out and offered to clean up the mess he'd made, but I told him I'd take care of it. Don't mention this to Luke, he said. It was almost 4 when I got back to the shop. I stacked the empty crates, cleaned the van, and clocked out. It was cold in the shop, cold outside, and cold in the van, where I'd left the door open so I could smell more than just barf and bleach. My legs and lower back and wrist hurt. I pulled a shoulder muscle carrying him. I'd worked over 10 hours that day and would clock over 45 that week. Matt had talked about emailing the labor board, and I wish he wasn't all talk and would do it. We all deserved overtime.